1276th day of the war. Russia is trying to get out of Trump's trap, forcing Lavrov to reject the President of the United States for several days in a row, to resist the introduction of Western contingent into Ukraine, as well as demanding from Kiev to refuse retreat to NATO and to limit the army's numbers. That is, to torture any guarantees of security. Trump obviously notes this negotiating front and publishes mystery posts where he criticizes Biden for not allowing Ukraine to fight against Russia and promising interesting times. Comparison between Putin and Nixon and Khrushchev. It's unclear whether such a policy will go further from the posts. Ukraine is striking at impossible goals in Russia on occupied territories. Just a couple of days ago, a grain depot, a railway station, a train with fuel, an airfield with UAVs, and a log of drone operators arrived. In response, Russia suffers strikes on the gas transport system, which should provide Ukrainians with light and weather in the winter, as well as on civilian enterprises, including the American ones. Russian breakthrough on Dobropillia has not yet been eliminated completely, despite the success of Ukrainian armed forces in cleaning the breakthrough units. Analysts urge not to run before the trains arrive and warn that the situation has not yet been fully corrected, although the catastrophe has managed to escape. Z channels in turn evaluate the situation around Pokrovsk extremely cheerfully and definitely less cheerfully than weeks earlier. Meanwhile, Ukrainians counterattacked in the south of the Donetsk region. The 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade liberated most of the village of Tolstoye. The Ministry of Defense is meanwhile trying to confirm the capture of the village under the Toretsk personnel, the capture of the previous village in the same direction, although even the Z-men reject them with the help of elementary geolocations. In Russian families, there is drama around the pay. The sister of a missing serviceman asks not to recognize him as dead, because then the coffins will reach his wife, who lives with a lover on the money for the husband's pleasure. Such is Santa Barbara. All this and more in today's latest report, which you can support with your like, comment, and subscription to the channel. All these actions help promote the video, especially your subscriptions. They're important for YouTube's algorithms. You can support the channel financially through Patreon, the link is in the description, or by buying NVPN. It's a tool to bypass blockages that allow you to watch YouTube at full speed, use Twitter, Instagram, call on Telegram, and WhatsApp. In short, use the normal internet, buy NVPN, and thereby support the release of new videos can be found in the description. In Russia, though, it's still legal to buy VPNs and their use, so buy one and get access to the normal internet. Lavrova's response to Ukraine's security guarantees has effectively destroyed Russian-American negotiations, said Bloomberg's European diplomat. Now Kremlin will try to convince the White House to stop trying to provide security guarantees for Ukraine and offer meetings with officials of a lower rank than presidents. That's what I was talking about, the author of the channel to be or comments, when he saw the very first statement of Putin's assistant Ushakov after Trump's negotiations with Putin on Monday, because Russia has a chance to break everything itself, and here it is, breaking everything. The attempts to make statements about Ukraine's security guarantees after the Monday summit met with difficulty, when the Kremlin publicly denied that Putin had agreed to it in Alaska. Subsequent comments from Lavrov, in which he consistently insisted on the need to return to the guarantees of the Istanbul Format 2022, where Russia is one of the guarantees and has the right to veto on any Western help, looked like attempts to slow the process for European officials. And now the question, did Moscow actually make the appropriate concessions during Putin's meeting with Trump in Alaska? According to U.S. intelligence or the U.S. delegation, it just misinterpreted Putin's open to guarantees for Ukraine, the publication complains. But what was said in Alaska wasn't as important as Trump's response to the meeting, said another Western official. It might turn out that Moscow made a mistake in letting Trump count the issue of guarantees for Ukraine as decided. And I've been talking about this for days now, because in the worst-case scenario, Trump might imagine everything as if he was on a duel, first, not publicly accepting Putin's meeting with Zelensky and his security guarantees, and then publicly commented on it, going after it. In this situation, Russia definitely doesn't look like the host, and any pressure on her looks justified. Well, I won't retort myself, we've already talked a lot about this before. However, all these parliamentary dances with Bubnov don't matter much, considering that Putin is ready to end the war in Ukraine only if he gets a legally obligatory promise from NATO to not expand further eastward, achieve restrictions on the size of the Ukrainian army, and sign an agreement on not placing Western soldiers in Ukraine. This is reported by Reuters, citing 3 anonymous sources. The agency clarifies that it has received the full list of conditions for Putin to be ready to end the war in Ukraine. According to Russian sources, Putin made a compromise on his territorial demands in June 2024. At that time, he aimed to give 4 annexed, or rather, you can't call them annexed areas that you don't even control. In short, areas written into the Russian constitution situation. In his post, he said Russia is achieving control over only the Donetsk region, while the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions are ready to freeze the front line. Journalists write that the Luhansk region is currently occupied by supporters of the CSDO. Well, I would make a small conclusion here. It has almost been completely captured for 3 years now, and as it were, Russia does not really continue to move in this direction. That is, yes, it is there by 98.5% captured, but the last percent of Russia is not given in any way. As part of the deal, Moscow is ready to give Ukraine small areas of territory which it controls in the Kharkov, Samskaya and Dnipropetrovsk regions, journalists write, although what it controls there in the Dnipropetrovsk region, I do not know anything about it. Samskaya is also a control zone. It reduces every week and is not big. At the same time, according to sources, Putin continues to hold on to his other previous demands. According to them, the refusal of Ukraine to retreat to NATO, the conclusion of the NATO agreement does not expand eastward, the introduction of restrictions on the size of the Ukrainian army, and the subscription to the agreement that no Western troops will be placed on the territory of Ukraine as part of the peacekeeping forces. According to one source, Reuters, there are several options for a peaceful deal. According to one of them, a three-way agreement between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States should be concluded, which will be recognized by the United States Security Advice. Another option is to return to the Istanbul Agreement of the 22nd year, where Russia and Ukraine discuss constant neutrality of Ukraine in exchange for security guarantees from 5 constant members of the Security Council of the EU: Britain, China, France, Russia, and the United States, the source added. That is, in the end, Putin really went to the one who refused the proposal for Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, which he still does not take in the foreseeable future, when even in the Donetsk region in a year or two he can still hope, although these hopes, in my opinion, are not justified. This, in my opinion, means that he does not consider himself as much of a master's position as several months ago during the last negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul. The other thing is that even these demands are unacceptable for Ukraine and are not connected with reality on the ground, since they cross 2 important red lines at once: no concessions to the territory, a serious guarantee of security, that is, a guarantee that the war will not resume after 3, 4, 5 years, and how to achieve this without NATO, Western contingent, and the power of the Ukrainian army is primarily unclear. In fact, we with the minor changes remain at the same point in which they were in the last years. It is impossible to find a position that has been built by both sides. At the same time, both sides are sure that they can continue to fight and break the situation in the ground in their favor. Or rather, the costs of continuing the war are still lower than the price of the refusal of the key demands, especially for Ukraine, since it has hit the very existence of the Ukrainian people and the state. Therefore, one way or another, the war, unfortunately, will most likely continue. Some hope that in this war the US will be ready to act more harshly against Russia, give very strange posts by Donald Trump, which he published yesterday. The US president published 2 posts that can be interpreted so that he is ready to take a more offensive position against Russia. These publications, however, allow different translations, although the translations I brought to you are quite stretched. Well, in short, the post in which Trump said the following: "It is very difficult, if it is impossible, to win the war without attacking the country of the invading person." This is like sport when a strong team has great defense but it is not allowed to play offensively. There are no chances to play. Also, from Ukraine to Russia, Jovish and extremely incompetent Joe Biden did not allow Ukraine to hit in the answer, only to defend itself. And what came of it? Interest times are ahead, Trump summed it up. There are no words in the second post, there are only 2 photos next to it. The lower one is the famous photo of the 59th year with the American exhibition in Moscow, on which the US Vice President and Richard Nixon flicking Soviet leaders Nikita Khrushchev. She's known as kitchen debate. On the upper photo, Trump flicking on Vladimir Putin's level of heart. It was taken on during their meeting in Alaska. This can really be interpreted different ways. On the one hand, Trump can truly signal to us that he is serious about his own ambitions, and on the other, it's not without fact that he simply found another way to scoff at Biden and act cool. Basically, so far, everything is going well in the scenario we already discussed. Trump is trying to fool both sides into the negotiation table. Russia started soft but persistently refusing something that, according to Trump, was agreed on. Trump started lightly hinting Russia that it was necessary to do so. In idea, Russia should sabotage the meeting of Putin-Zelensky, after which the US president should return to the tough rhetoric towards the Russian Federation and, in the best case, impose sanctions. According to me, this is somewhere in the beginning of September. But again, Trump is a volatile person. There are a lot of factors in international politics, so let's time it, let's stop talking about far-fetched statements and let's move on to the more important things. One of the most important, without a doubt, whether it's independent of something or not, whether it's dependent on what we're discussing at this particular moment, is support for the Ukrainian army. This is where the principle of Ukraine continues to exist. Without an army begins. Without an army, Ukraine would no longer exist. So support for the Ukrainian army is the best thing anyone can do right here and now to help victims of aggression defend themselves from this very aggression, and we are continuing to raise funds for the 110th Brigade. Yesterday, we raised half of this fund, thank you very much, but I hope today we'll raise the second half or we'll hit it in the near future. here's a message from the fighters to you. To all battalions of the 150th Heavy Mechanized Brigades, we ask you to join the fundraising for a tool set for reconnaissance and fire control, for a unified group of fire support. Help us destroy the enemy even more effectively. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to glory. Here is the QR code for Monobank in the description of Monobank, Private, PayPal, and USDT TRC20. There is unfortunately a quite large restriction on Monobank to transfer money from Ukraine to Ukraine, so please use PayPal and cryptocurrency USDT TRC20. This will allow you to easily and inevitably donate and help Ukrainian soldiers in order for them to continue defending their country, destroying occupiers and fascists, defending their family and loved ones, and that it will help them to survive. So many thanks to everyone who participates in these fundraisings. You really help save lives. Well, we are moving on. The UK has taken new measures intended to prevent Russia from bypassing Western sanctions through the financial foundation of Kyrgyzstan and the cryptocurrency network. New measures have replenished the list of more than 200,700 already active sanctions. Under pressure to spread sanctions, Russia is actively using Kyrgyzstan's financial system to pass funds through unclear financial networks, including by using cryptocurrency, as stated by the British government. These networks have created a confused scheme to bypass sanctions made by the UK and its partners. 8 organizations and physical individuals were financed through sanctions, including the Capital Bank based in Kyrgyzstan and its director, Kontamer, through which Russia pays for military goods. Sanctions also touched on the cryptocurrency exchange GreenX and Mir, as well as the infrastructure connected with the new A7, A5 cryptocurrency token, which is provided with rubles. With its help, just 4 months later, it managed to spend $9.3 billion through a specialized cryptocurrency exchange. As the British government claims, this cryptocurrency was specifically created to bypass Western sanctions. If Kremlin thinks it can cover its desperate attempts to softening the consequences of our sanctions by washing money through doubtful cryptocurrencies, it is deeply mistaken, notes the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the UK, Stephen Dowdy. The Ukrainian Flamingo missile is now produced one by one daily, reports the United Press. Because of the pink initial version, it is also called that. FP5 is one of the largest such missiles in the world, which is capable of delivering a useful load of up to 1150 kilograms. By October, it is planned to increase the power to produce 7 units per day. This statement is very serious, comparable to the pace of production of all Russian missiles combined. The question, of course, is in the effectiveness. The Ukrainian air defense learned to shoot down Russian cruise missiles quite effectively. However, in combination with the reloading of Russian air defense with drones, I think it can achieve the necessary effect from the flaming. In the video, the representatives of the frame from the workshop, once again, in the video, the representatives of the workshop where the missiles are produced were presented. Many analysts, including Tataragami, have criticizing this video. The workshop's outlines allow experienced asinteros to geolocate videos even if they're shot in areas with so many examples. I hope the workshop is relatively protected from Russian strikes, and I'll add that yes, please, never do that, don't, well, I don't know. Video launches are normal, video of the missile with a blurred form is normal, the workshop, don't, please, well, please, I've seen it many times. I know how the Russian asintro works, there are also talented guys there. Please never publish your positions or a production plan at all if this is, of course, not a false plant built. If it is in the false plant, there are no questions, and this, on the contrary, is a normal tactic, but I have big, unfortunately, doubts. Here, so if someone heard who has a connection to such things, please don't do this, but this is really dangerous, and Flamingo is a quite important story. Why? The deployment of Flamingo production can have much longer-term consequences than the arrival of current combat actions on Russia, according to analyst Fabian Hoffman. Here is what he writes about this. I understand that most of the conversation is focused on the colossal consequences of mass production of Flamingo for the current war. But let's not let go of the serious consequences that the acquisition of Ukraine of mass-produced heavy weapons for striking at a great depth will end up on a post-war architecture of deterrence. This is Ukraine's greatest guarantee of security. If it can deploy 5,000 of such and similar missiles ready to destroy up to 25% of Russia's economic potential in 24 hours and 48 hours, further Russian aggression will become impossible, so be ready for 2 things. Russia will hide nuclear weapons to force the Western states to force Ukraine to stop strikes on the Russian industry, and Russia and its proxies in the West will insist that any peace agreement include full disarming of Ukraine in the missile sphere, of course, without similar demands of Russia, Hoffman concludes. And I would also add that Putin himself is in the trap. Pre-war predictions of Kremlin propaganda have come true. Russia's borders will be deployed missiles capable of striking the very heart of the country. But now they're not American ones, they're Ukrainian. And Russia won't be able to do anything about it, because it's clear that Western countries won't force Ukraine to arm arms, since they are only happy if Ukraine gains its own means of holding Russian aggression without the help of NATO troops. A classic self-proclaimed prediction of Putin. However, Putin is a specialist in it. No Russophobia has ever existed in the world, but many now treat this action of Russia as a threat to Russian capital and citizens. No anti-Russia in Ukraine has ever existed. There were two countries with incredibly close connections, including cultural ones, but due to Russian aggression there is no country in the world now that Ukrainians would hate more. No, well, except for the United States sometimes at certain times. Let's put it this way. There was no aggressive expansion of NATO, but after the Russian aggression, Finland and Sweden quickly entered the alliance, but no missile threat to Russia existed until this moment. What else does Putin have according to forecasts? The desire of the West to destroy and capture Russia, but at such a pace this self-reassuring prediction can someday come true. More news about the defense industrial complex. The Ukrainian defense industrial complex, in cooperation with European partners, has learned how to repair unmanned depots from the military, according to the publication Militarny. This was reported by the Defense Minister Denis Mickael. The corresponding statement was heard during a meeting with the delegation of DPRK Deutschland, headed by Executive Director Ralph Ketzel. KNDS is a leading manufacturer of weapons, whose products are already proving effective on the battlefield. The allocations are focused on strengthening industrial cooperation. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry is working on launch of repair and service hubs to quickly restore and service the weapons. The company plans to develop a center for the repair of heavy equipment in Ukraine. As part of such cooperation, the first 3 Gepards have already been repaired. Today, the Gepard is one of the key anti-aircraft artillery systems in the composition of the Ukrainian air defense. These self-propelled vehicles play a decisive role in covering cities and strategic objects from attacks by Russian drones, kamikaze-type Shakt, as well as cruise missiles launched from the territory of Russia of the occupied regions. Therefore, the less time is wasted on repair, the faster the unit returns in service, the better. High-speed firepower of 235 guns and the presence of own radars make the Gepard especially effective in fighting small-scale targets at small heights. Nevertheless, important role Gepard plays on the line of combat contact. Thanks to its mobility and autonomy, it is capable of accompanied by Ukrainian Armed Forces units, providing cover for them from Russian tactical aircraft, combat helicopters, and reconnaissance UAVs. German DPRK expressed its interest in the experience of soldiers of the Defense Force for the use of their weapons. During a meeting, representatives of the DPRK and Ukraine's Defense Ministry agreed to establish such communication, which will provide improvement for the company's products, taking into account the experience of a modern, real war. After the UAV raid in Novoshakhtinsk, Rostov region, a fire industrial plant hit Novoshakhtinsk, Rostov region, the governor Yuri Slusar reported. According to media, the Novoshakhtinsk refinery aimed at Ukraine's Telegram channel Exail Nova Plus. It is said that the plant was defended by 2 PVO systems, Panzer S-1 and ZR-Kater, but this did not help. The Ukrainian General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces confirmed the strike to the Novoshakhtinsk refinery. These strikes on the refinery have already led to consequences for Russia's fuel market, the Russian fuel market. If you watched yesterday's video, then look carefully and you will see that in Russia there is simply already a rumble and even a fuel crisis is developing. On the night of August 21, UAVs attacked the Voronezh region. According to Governor Alexander Gusiev, as a result of the drop of UAVs, the energy facility was damaged and several villages were left without electricity. A number of passenger trains are detained. According to the Russian Armed Forces, one of the drones fell on the area of Rosvyrsakhanovka in the area of Zhuravka and Arynovskaya stations, which led to the pause of 19 trains moving. A leak occurred in the substation in the fire. Okugor and Analytica clarifies this. In the General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces, due to special operations, another strike on Russian logistics was also reported. It was again a train from the General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces located in occupied territory. Ukrainian military reported the following: the special operation SSO has disrupted logistics of occupiers during occupied Crimea. The forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces special operations carried out near the Jankoy railway station. The operation took place on the night of August 21. Special forces struck the Russian supply unit with firepower materials. As a result of the special actions, it was complicated to provide support to the southern group of Russian troops, they write. What and how the train was hit is not clarified. Well, good, let them guess. But there are frames of objective control, which was found on the social network channel Russian Context. Burnswell comments in the channel, it is difficult to agree with them. In addition, Astra found out the details of the previous attack on the railway composition of the Zaporizhzhia region on the morning of August 19. The train, which followed the occupied wave in Jankoy, drove on the mine. This happened in the Chernigov district, in the area of the Stolnevo station. The driver tried to stop urgently while part of the train hit the UAV. As a result, according to the sources of Astra and the emergency services, the threats were lost and 14 cisterns with fuel broke through, 2 of them burned out. 2 fire trains were sent to the destruction, but Ukrainian armed forces again attacked the area with the help of 2 HIMARS and UAVs. At 13 o'clock, Ukrainian armed forces hit the fire site again. As a result, 4 soldiers died who accompanied and guarded the unit. Another soldier was injured. At the moment of the strike, they were 300 meters from the burning cisterns. The railway track was also damaged. The total number of soldiers was 16 cisterns with gasoline and 4 with diesel fuel. The train, according to sources, was also equipped with a platform from the Russian system. Earlier, photos and videos of attacks and the consequences of the strike were published by Ukrainian channels. Yesterday, the Balitsky of the Zaporizhzhia region announced that the refinery incident is connected, including with logistical problems since the cisterns with gasoline are under the threat of Ukrainian attacks. Ukrainian military correspondent Moshavets, back on August 19 before the recent attacks, commented on the Ukrainian campaign as follows. No one needs to explain the direct connection between the attacks on the refinery, the railway trains with fuel, the transport unit, the railway specialties, and the capabilities of the Russian troops to carry out an operational and strategic maneuver with the forces and means within the framework of the operational deployment of their strike. Groups in certain operational directions. At the UGSVSU, someone was very creative, counted the vulnerability of the key points of the Russian infrastructure in this regard. Let's hope that the plan will work and Russian logistics will really be seriously damaged. The NASA firm's satellite service recorded a fire at the non-functional airfield Khersonets in Sevastopol, which is used to launch the BPA. The publication Astra writes that on the night of August 20, local residents reported on the explosion and fire. Mickael explained this with exercises of the Chornomorsk fleet and the service extra reaction for the practical operation of extinguishers of fires and the elimination of emergency situations in conditions close to combat. In the meantime, the analysis of images of NASA, carried out by Astra, shows that the fire has not been extinguished. What kind of exercises are these? The consequences of the satellite images published by the channel Dnipro Osin and Garbuz showed that the BPA raid actually took place while the hangar of an unknown purpose was damaged. It is not excluded that drones were stored there, but there is no confirmation of this yet. Dnipro Osin Garbuz also shared images of the Toretsk refinery after the raid on the night of August 10, conducting their next analysis. On the frames of objective control, 2 fire lines appeared. On the satellite images in the same places we can see burned out pipeline, and around them is engineering equipment of repair brigades restoring damaged units. Technical structures of the main LOAVT-6 unit were seriously damaged, as well as part of the pipeline connecting the plant, also respected for operations of the refinery. The Defense Forces are not distracted by Russian military targets. The TV channel reported a strike at the location of the drone operators in the Kursk region, Astra reports. The morning of August 20, Ukrainian Armed Forces struck the locations of Russian drone operators in the Solnyshka camp, which is located in the village of Bolshyturavets in the Obyansky district. This is today at 5:15 a.m. Our birdies died in the Obyansky district of the Kursk region on the territory of the former children's camp, Solnyshka. Svetlana Pamich Heroin wrote for this channel the call of S.H. Kuiper. Also about the strike in the Obyansky district, the Severny Canal wrote, which all it and analysts suspect to have something to do with the Ukrainian Sepso, and the Ukrainian journalist Denis Kazanski wrote about it. The last one published a photo of an allegedly strike at the camp. The drone coordinates could not be deliberately wrong with volunteer Margarita Krivtsova, who published a video transferring military aid to this location, which is believed in the TG channels. Margarita herself and her VK group wrote that this is disinformation, everything is live and nothing has happened. At the same time, she has in the comments, some users claim that the arrival was still there. There is no confirmation of this information yet, we will continue to monitor you. Well, thanks to the Russian volunteers who point out Ukrainian military at the Russian states of the location. In the Z channels, they talked about the real effectiveness of turning off the mobile internet for the countering the raid on Ukrainian UAVs. It turned out not to seem such a practice is not useful, but even harmful since it violates the work of mobile groups of air defense, which, as you can guess, coordinate their actions through the chats in the messengers. That's how it turned out, writes the channel 13 Tacticals, that by the end of the 4th year of the war, the only stable constant connection between the units is mobile internet. I don't write on purpose in what messenger, not to go against the wind. Whether it's bad or very bad, it doesn't matter. This is a fact that different kinds of people trying to silence the report back and forth. The cutting off of mobile internet destroys interaction. I am ready to personally bring the responsible officials to the list of reports, statements, and reasons why the cutting of mobile internet is a diversion against us themselves. During the active practice of cutting off, the number of exact arrival and departure did not decrease. Dependent on positive results did not give. On the contrary, a lot could be intercepted due to the interaction of different units. This interaction has already been caused by unequal servicemen who want to do their job well. Listen, please, stop listening to incompetent people who, even in the places of arrival, have not been once, the Z channel complains. Cutting off mobile internet during the raid of enemy UAVs is a completely useless matter, confirms the channel records of the veteran. Moreover, as the colleague from Crimea noted correctly, this is a damage to the group that is fighting these very drones. The coordination between MoGS mobile fire groups happens through a closed chat in messengers and no other way. Because of the cutting of the internet, a simple collapse of interaction happens, as a result of which the chaos and mess begins. Recently, while working as a fly in the shelter of Belgrade, I personally observed the coordination of work of all those who were involved in reflecting attacks on the city. The main coordination was through the internet. Rapid, convenient, and most importantly, effective. Enclosed chats are only tested people who are added according to the recommendations. For those who are worried about security, then no secret information is published there. Only the indication of UAV flights with the indication of the name of the flight apparatus, high rate of control, and video signal. The work is coordinated and clear, and all this is because in Belgrade they do not cutting off the mobile internet. In general, it is necessary to stop this useless practice, they believe, in this channel. And why will not this practice be stopped, explains in the channel Prizrak Novorossiysk. I confirm, absolutely useless writes there and sometimes even harmful. Here you can just take the experience of Donetsk. They don't do such a beep here. This does not remove the questions of attack of UAV, but it does not interfere with the interaction of units and services. Turns off the mob of internet on the big ground is only the initiative of officials for a reason which did not come out, so that later it is read that the measures are accepted and the work is carried out uselessly. But that is, to a certain degree, from these useless initiatives of officials, Ukrainians. Achieve local goals of terrorist shelling, when a relative small resource, and this small resource is achieved by the hyperreaction of authorities, which complicates and borders on the life of the population as well as the work of the structure of the departments. You can repeat here probably in the sense that except for the same Belgrade region, the presence of any serious organized mobile group of air defense on the territory of Russia on the fourth year of Ukrainian strikes is not especially noticeable. So why do you need internet if you do not have mind, and the mind too? The reports about the deliberately accepted measures are much more important, and that drones controlled by mobile communication always have a doubling navigation system. Officials in general do not care. So yes, obviously this practice does not go anywhere, and good, it complicates the work of the Russian air defense system. Thank you very much. On the night of August 21, for the first time in 2 weeks, Russian troops carried out a really massive missile drone strike on Ukraine. According to the Eastern Forces of Ukrainian Armed Forces, 574 drones took part in the raid. 543 were able to shoot down or suppress 40 cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. 31 were shot down. The hit of drone missiles is recorded in 11 locations. As a result of the drone strike and missiles hit Lvov, 1 person died, another 3 were injured, said the mayor of the city Andriy Sadovy. GHS clarified that the hit is recorded in several areas of the city. Private houses, non-residential buildings including a children's garden and transport equipment are damaged. In the city of Mickael in the Zakarpattia region, as a result of the night attack, according to recent data, 19 people were injured. They were injured in various ways. An industrial facility was also attacked. A strong fire occurred there. President Vladimir Zelensky clarified that an American enterprise was hit. An ordinary civilian enterprise, he said. American investments made such familiar daily things as a coffee machine. This information was confirmed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy Sybiga. According to media, it is about the Flex electronics plant. Let me remind you, as several months ago in the White House, it was said that the presence of American business in Ukraine is itself a guarantee of security. As we can see, it is not. Rocket strike on Mokhiv was commented on by President of Hungary Tamás Shajak. Initially on Facebook, he wrote that he hopes for a faster recovery for all injured, citing the Russian rocket strike, but after a while, he deleted that post. Instead of it, an almost identical text appeared from which Shajak removed the word Russian, rhyming the name Shajak with something or not will be, although I really want to. Ukrainian publics report a powerful explosion and fire in Dnipropetrovsk region. Political infrastructure facility was possibly hit. According to local Hedova in the Urevsk community of the Pavlograd district, several fires occurred after the UAV attack. A 48-year-old man was injured. Z channels claim that ballistic missiles hit a gas storage facility at the Pavlograd gas compressor station. In addition, pro-Russian channels reported that a facility of oil and gas infrastructure was also attacked in the Kharkiv region. Again, I would like to pre-reference that sign of equality between such Ukrainian and Russian strikes. If Ukrainian attacks on the oil production infrastructure are considered to deprive the Russian budget of profits and the Russian army of firepower, then the only goal of the strikes on the Ukrainian gas and transport system is to break the production of electric energy on the refinery and the power supply in the winter. That is, in fact, a new genocide of the Ukrainian people, and this is in addition to the fact that, in principle, principle, Russian strikes are strikes on the aggressor by victim. Strike victims on the aggressor is an attempt to protect themselves and stop this war. Therefore, you cannot compare them, not in this, not in the previous meaning, but also in the fact that Russia is using unequal weapons, including cassettes of ammunition, as we discussed with you earlier, which is a military crime itself if you need an international legal assessment. You can't forget about the bloody murders that Russian drone operators do every day in Kherson region after major strikes. A Ukrainian journalist, Yuri Budusov, and not only him, shared a video where a Russian drone drops ammunition to a clearly peaceful resident who cleans the roof of his house, apparently after the previous arrival. It's a monstrous video because of such insolence, because of the fact that the Russians post it themselves. It produces an incredible anger. And literally cleans the roof, simply cleans the roof, perhaps from the previous arrival. Not military, has nothing to do with it at all, and it is aimed not only at killing, but then also publishes these frames. Here it is necessary to remind you that Russian pilots regularly post such video of strikes on civilian vehicles of the Russian armed forces, and the peaceful Kherson themselves use it to work out strikes on the moving target. The fact that this person has been without a small year, and this is only since then, as various media began to tell, more or less as a punishment to the world community and its hopelessness. In the Pokrovsk direction, no battles are lost in the area of the so-called Russian breakthrough over Dobropillia. The military inspector Konstantin Mashavets called on the Russian military to decrease the degree of victory. Here is what he wrote. Apparently, Russian armed forces managed to avoid the significant unfavorability over the Dobropillia direction. The Russian command pulled another brigade to the front and managed to expand its encirclement towards Nikanorovka and Shakhov. The Russians took it to the western outskirts. Acherev Yar also seems to be not liberated yet, at least completely. In addition, the 8th Army of Russian Armed Forces is quite actively attacking on its left flank, and that's exactly to the east of the Horlovina breakthrough and has advanced. Therefore, to the numerous inspectorates and experts commenting on frontline events, I advise you to wait until then with loud clarifications like Kotlov, Roskromov, and others, Mashavets concludes. However, even from his post it's clear that the defense forces managed to avoid the worst scenario. The offensive of the Russians toward Dobropillia has stopped, the threat of a road to Dobropillia, Kramatorsk to Dobropillia itself is eliminated. Now the question is actually asked about the control of the salient at a depth of 7 small kilometers, not 17, on which the forward Russian groups advanced during the so-called breakthrough. So you can calm down a little but not relax and continue to watch the development of the event in this still hot section of the front. So you can calm down a little but not relax and continue to watch the development of the event in this still hot section of the front. You can calm down a little but not relax and continue to watch the development of the event in this still hot section of the front. But again, I accept the call of the Mashavets, the so-called, on my account too, and as it were, the only thing is that Pokrovsk Yar is not clear to me, because from there we're not just flag picking from the Ukrainian side but a full-fledged video with control, where someone put the flag and ran away. Not from the drone but from a specific brigade standing and shooting. It is not clear yet. In general, we will monitor. I hope that in the next week we will summarize this breakthrough, how it began, how it continued, and what it ended up with. The situation around Pokrovsk looks like the Russians are happy without telling the Z-War blogger Anatoly Radov about it. Despite the objective component of the channel, he writes, nevertheless, of course, there are many cabinets for throwers who have one motto: it must go to the end. There are options for everything from Lvov to Odessa, Kiev, and Lvov. I have a question for them. Do you remember how long we have been surrounding Pokrovsk? Well, in the style of Podolyaki Daily, almost surrounded, the Ukrainian front is cracking, Ukrainian armed forces in fire, plus ASIN, according to our destroyed sabotage, brings its leap, plus DESAT of Ukrainians. But let's just go by the fact, by the terms, remind ourselves how long we have been surrounding Pokrovsk. Therefore, for me, to laugh at the words of Zelensky from 4 years for the capture of Donbass seems strange. Not believe it, with every month it becomes only more difficult since the small sky has covered the Ukrainian army. Well, and on Pokrovsk. On the southern side of the offensive it slowed down, says Radov. For what reason, I will not write, but everything is up. All these overrides almost in the center of the city were by sabotage and reconnaissance groups. At the moment they are again more close to Lionovichy well, and it is not taking Chunishina in any way. Ukrainians, as usual, have created a couple of kill zones which cannot be bypassed, White noted. There's hope for a closure from above, that is, to take the Rodinskoye blockade of Dobropillia highway, but even there it's very difficult for the guys to advance. Also, there's little sky behind the Ukrainians. Some bloggers' replacements are far ahead, just covering their own public. If there are no victorious replacements, the public will start hurrying every day. And now about the breakthrough. I think no one knows for sure right now. The breakthrough was made so that information doesn't leak out. But of course, after the Ukrainians appeared, the information got into the network. I personally think our soldiers in the Golden Well are hardly present. Pokrovsk, a question. I hope they'll write from the place today tomorrow, writes Radov. The Russian military is also complaining about the situation in the direction. Here, for example, well, we don't have anyone to send. We don't have a crew at all. Of the 3 companies, well, we can get a company. A military man of a tank unit performing combat tasks in the Pokrovsk direction told about the difficult situation in the military unit. He noted the serious shortage of personnel because of which the unit cannot perform the tasks set. That is, we were gathered in the first company, all in 3 companies. We gathered 10 crews, well, the assault company was called Tank. 10 tanks, 10 crews, now they are not there, well, the tank is there, but people are not there, some are wounded, some are in the 100th. The man clarified that of all the tanks located in the positions, only 2 are ready, when the rest of the equipment is in repair or is used in other sectors. Well, it depends. Now we have 4 in the forest hidden, 2 are still in service, the rest are just on duty. In addition, he said that due to the lack of a personnel in the assault units, the commanders scare in the tankers with the sending to the assault. But we are also afraid of everyone with the assault. Well, for now we are standing here, the infantry is starting to cut. We sometimes leave, we are working. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported on the capture of the village of Alexander Shultin on the eastern flank. The Direction published a video with frames of battles from there. The Z channel Rybar, however, rejects the statement of the department. According to it, the battles are only on the approach to the village. In addition to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the videos of allegedly liberated Alexander Shultin, I put it in quotation marks, posted several state media. Zvizdaria, Novosti, Taz. As Rybar says, in fact it is about the archive frames located south of Delievka, which the Russian troops took before that. And no one even tried to look at it. Comments in the informal channel Not a Fisherman, there is in railway in Alexander Shultin, spoiler, no. Well, the rich people, for example, can take Kiev, the frames from Donetsk, turn around and go home, since all the tasks of the SVO are done. In principle, I have nothing against such a thing. Deep State notes the advance of the Russians in the South Donetsk direction in the area of Filia, Zaporizhzhia, Malivka, and Volnovo Pole. At the same time, the Ukrainian 5th Separate Heavy Mechanized Brigade told about a successful counterattack in the settlement of Tolstoye in the Donetsk region. Here is what the brigades wrote in the channel. Thanks to the coordinated actions of the fighters of the 5th Separate Heavy Mechanized Brigade, most of the settlement of Tolstoye, Donetsk region, was returned to the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Our soldiers day and night constantly destroyed the enemy from the air and from the ground, knocking it out from the Ukrainian ground step by step. Thanks to the courage and professionalism of the infantry units, the pilots of the unmanned aerial systems, and the artillery units of the 5th OTMBR, they managed to achieve this result. The armed fight continues, glory to Ukraine, they write. In the Deep State, they say that the Russians continue to pressure in the Stepnogorsk and Zaporizhzhia directions. Here is what the analysts write about the situation in this section of the front. In the image, you can see an approximate number of Russian strikes over the past several weeks, which demonstrate the nature of the attempts to reach Stepnogorsk. Right after the capture of Kamenskoye, Russian armed forces tried to quickly develop their success in the direction of Stepnogorsk, trying to get over the tree lines and fields. In the entire zone, they show the initial successful attempts of the Russians, but the fighters of the Ukrainian Defense Force in particular, the pilots and assault soldiers, have led these attempts to nothing. Lately, the Russian armed forces have switched even more attention to the settlement of Plavnaya and are trying to get to the village of Zapodnaya. Pushing deep into the territory works better as it helps to build a tight line where you can hide, secure yourself, and accumulate money for further advance. Sometimes you even manage to reach the private building of Primorsky, but the Russians don't live there for long. Also, the Russian military uses the opportunity to get behind the lines of the Khav Reservoir, which gradually turns into a forest, which also worth noting. Of course, there are separate cases of continuing assault actions from the northern part of Kamenskoye on tree lines and fields, but they are more like many-hour crawls in cloaks that end the same way, a defeat from the pilots of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. In the Deep State, the Russians were spotted in the central part of Stepnogorsk by several people who managed to slip into the village but were very quickly eliminated, according to Deep State. The Deep State also notes Russian advances near Torskoye. The zone, closely controlled by the Russians, is close to the village. Part of Zerchnya on the other bank of the Rikazhirevets River turned out to be in the gray zone. Just from this gray zone, an epic video was posted recently where a Ukrainian tank is destroying a Russian infantry group, the Zerchnya, that has Slipen. As can be seen, the Russian threat in the Lyman direction does not lessen. Sooner or later, the Russian command hopes to reach the Severesk and Slaviansk here, or rather Slaviansk, forming a wedge around the Slaviansk-Konstantinovsk agglomeration from the north, but this is still very far away if this is, in principle, possible. The author of the channel Ubeshno8, the main mob of today's Telegram, tells about the rules of life on the SVO established by the command. It turns out such a Caucasus with FPV drones. Here's what he writes. In general, for your understanding of the depth of our depths, our rear zone in the far rear is announced on the territory living by PPD rules. With everything leakage, nothing is allowed, 2 checkings per day, documents in army order, exceeding everything well, news of the North LNR with 1 line, the military now cannot go to Sterils. There, the peace of the civilians exceeding everything, and this is the road junction from the military part through the border. 5 vehicles are missed per day, including trucks, supplies, ammunition. This is allegedly to limit the opportunity to escape with a purge. And in fact, the one who came up with this must have gone a traditional Ukrainian hero for slowing down our lines. Ukrainians are reaching and troubling the FPVs up to 30 kilometers deep in our territory. The kamikaze of the airplane type is even further, and wings and quiet walks. In the same Storybles they came, they do not bring a humanitarian aid from the rear to the front. From the front, it is necessary to cut off the cars in the far rear. This concerns everything, including construction materials for looting. It is forbidden to stop at stores. This is a ban of the district, surrounded by redisks. Low-ranked personnel understand more, but those captured in the drunken form are also armed with assault weapons. If a passenger is unregistered into the Russian Armed Forces, meet by chancellors or servicemen, if he is recorded in reports with violators, his driver is together with him sent to assaults. This is already our local scumbag. According to the law of peaceful time in rear areas of the zone, Toloviks now drive east, also often than combatants in the attack on Ukrainians to the west. Our division is the worst in the armed forces for completing the vacation plan. Practice of prohibiting vacationing to a general unit. If there is at least one person who has not returned from the vacation, the paratrooper gives his fruits. 1 month before the 3-year service for mobilization, he complains. In such conditions, We Serve Russia ends its story with the author of the channel. In Russian families, every other day is a new drama due to the payout to the deceased and missing serviceman. With a scream for help, the sister of the missing serviceman appeals. Gatkov Vyacheslav Vladimirovich, Putin Vladimir Vladimirovich, Ministry of Defense, Military Unit 52562, 47th Tank Division. I appeal to you, to all deputies. I appeal to the investigative committee. I appeal to all prosecutors' offices. According to her, Vyacheslav is located in the area of the Volchansk settlement. A year after the state of absence disappeared, the family has not received any information. Now the soldiers try to admit that they are dead. The sister claims that his wife is interested in this for the sake of the payout. She explains that Vyacheslav's wife filed a divorce before the contract was concluded. But after the contract was signed, she decided not to hurry with the divorce. The reasons are money. Now the woman lives with another man and gains all the payouts for the missing husband. And I gave him in search. I found all the wives, sisters who found me. We created a group. I am not alone in this group. I create, which is a military unit and can give an answer to all our questions. Where are our guys? How to send to a military mission. You could not experience soldiers who have never held a rifle, who have not passed training. You sent them to such a cruel mission. According to the sister, the military unit does not go into contact with relatives, does not provide any information. Moreover, it shows neglected. But she gets it in full. She got all the payments for my brother. She got it from other authorities. She got payments and still gets it, and still gets monetary compensation in full. The woman asks not to change the status of her brother as dead, since in this case all the payments will finally remain with Vyacheslav's wife. But there are also wise people who act like they're cool and say who you are, but that's already too late. What kind of drama was that? Not Nakal, but Akal, as they say. In general, don't go to the Russian army, don't go there in any way, don't let your relatives go there because they will die, and then you will run and say that everything is not fair. Well, Mickael, Nacke was with you, and see you soon. All the best, bye.